Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Patience. In today's video I am going to be sharing with you guys how I made this beautiful wrap top with tulip hem. Before we get started, kindly click the subscribe button. If you have done that, let's get into it. I'll be using 2 yards of Houndstooth Fabric, and I'll also be using 2 yards of plain black crepe. So both fabrics have the same texture. I'll also be drafting on this pattern paper. I've gone ahead to mark my shoulder line. Right on the shoulder line, I'll mark half of my shoulder width and ½ inch for sewing allowance. That is 8.5 inches. And from the 8.5 inches, I'll come down by 1 inch for my shoulder slant. So for the neck width, I'll be using 4 inches. I'll make the slant line this way. After doing that, I'll mark my chest line, which is also the armhole line. In order to get a straight line, I'll mark 9 inches from my shoulder line. I'll bring down the shoulder measurement to the chest line and connect it this way. And for the neck depth, I'll be using 2 inches. So I'll be using this pattern to cut out the back piece. So I'll mark 2 inches for the neck depth. And I'll mark my shoulder to bust, shoulder to waist, and shoulder to hip, which is also the full length. So I'll be using 26 inches and I'll add 1 inch for hemming allowance. That's 27 inches. I'll go ahead and extend the lines. After doing that, on the chest line, I'll mark 1/4 of my bust circumference plus ½ inch for ease and ½ inch for side seam. I'll mark the same measurement on the bust line. And on the waistline, I'll mark 1/4 of my waist circumference plus ½ inch for ease and ½ inch for side seam. On the hip line, I'll also mark 1/4 of my hip measurement plus ½ inch for ease and ½ inch for side seam. Now I'll mark the midpoint of this line, which is 4 inches. From the 4 inches, I'll go in by ½ inch for the back armhole and 3/4 inch for the front armhole. Using my armhole curve, I'll curve the back arm side and the front arm side. And I'll add ½ inch on the shoulder for seam allowance. Now on the hem, I'll leave about 7 or 8 inches allowance because I'll be making the triangle shape on the hem. So I'll bring down those 12 inches this way. And I'll cut it out. So I'll be using this pattern to cut out the back piece. I cut out the back neckline and the back armhole, and I've gone ahead to extend the lines to the other side of the pattern paper, as you can see. So I'll be using this to cut out the back piece on my fabric. I'm just going to fold it this way and cut it out on my fabric. To do that, I'll place both fabrics this way, the right sides together. I've gone ahead to mark 1 inch that I'll use to join the fabric. I'll go ahead and mark my shoulder line. So I'll place the pattern this way and I'll ensure the shoulders are aligned, as you can see, and I'll cut it out. After doing that, I'll pin it down. So I'll be sewing on the 1 inch. That is it for the back piece. On the front piece, I'll go ahead and trim out the front arm side. Now I'll be making the overlap on the front piece. Remember, I took out 2 inches already for the back neckline, so I'm going to place my measuring tape this way. For the front neck depth, I'll be using 5 inches, and I'm marking the 5 inches on the midpoint of the pattern paper, as you can see. In order for us to understand what I'm trying to do, I am going to label this part of the front piece as the right side, and I'll label this part of the front piece as the left. Starting from the right side of the front piece, I'll connect the neck width to this 5 inches I marked down to the waist line. So I'll make an asymmetric line this way. So I'll be cutting this part out. Now on the left side of the front piece, I'll be working on the left side. I'll fold it this way. Remember, I left about 8 inches here. So I am going to mark the midpoint of this line. I used 12 inches, so the midpoint is 6 inches. From the 6 inches, I'll come down by 7 inches plus hemming allowance. I'll make sure the 7 inches is at the midpoint. After doing that, I'll connect the 7 inches to the side seam this way. And I'll also connect the 7 inches to the waistline on the right side of the pattern paper. I'll also be cutting out this part. So now I have the right side of the front piece and the left side of the front piece. That is on one part of the front piece, if that makes sense. So I am going to cut this out. So at this point, you can use just this piece to cut out both pieces on the front piece. But in order for you to understand what I just did, I am going to be cutting out the left and the right side of the other part of the front piece, if that makes sense. But I'm going to cut it out for you to understand. Using another pattern paper, I've gone ahead to mark out all the measurements I marked earlier. Now I'll cut out the front arm side. And I'll do the same thing I did on the other pattern. I'll mark the neck depth of the front piece, which is 5 inches. So I'm marking it on the midpoint of the front piece. Now I'll label this as the left and label this as the right side of the fabric. Remember, I labeled the other one right and this part left. So let me bring the other pattern. Remember, I labeled this as the right side and this as the left. Now I'm making this as the left and this as the right. This time I'm making the asymmetric line on the left side of the pattern. So I'll connect the neck depth to this 5 inches down to the waist. And I'll cut out this part. Remember, on the other piece I made the triangle shape on the left side. Now I'll be making the triangle shape on the right side. I'll mark the midpoint this way, come down by 7 inches, and I'll ensure it is at the 7 inches at the midpoint. I'll connect it to the side seam and also connect the 7 inches to the waistline. I'll also be cutting out this part. Now I have the other piece of the front piece. Now I'll bring out the other piece and overlap it this way, making sure the waistline are aligned on both sides. So the 5 inches on the neck is aligned, and the waist and the hem, as you can see, we have the right side and the left side. You can decide to turn it this way. Just make sure the waistline are aligned. So I'll be sewing on 1/2 inch on the side seam. So this is going to overlap this. As you can see, the measurements are accurate. Now I'll be cutting this out on my fabric. Like I said, you can use one part of the front piece to cut out both fabrics. just place the right sides together or the wrong sides together. So I've gone ahead to cut it out on my fabric. So I cut out the right side using the plain black fabric and the left side using the other fabric. So I placed the wrong sides of both fabric together and I used the right part of the pattern to cut both out. And I notched the waistline. So I'll be using a bias tape to finish up the edges. On the back piece, I've joined the 1 inch, as you can see, and I left 1 inch opening here. So I'll be using the bias tape to finish up the neckline. I'll be using this fabric to cut out the bias tape and use the black fabric to cut out the bias tape before I join it together. So after joining, I trim it and ironed open. So I'll serge both sides. That is it for the back piece. I've gone ahead to cut out the bias tape using both fabrics. This is 1.5 inches. I folded 1/2 inch on both sides and fold it again, just like a bias tape. So I'll be using it to finish up the edges on the front and the back neckline. Remember, I'll be joining the side seam, so I'll not be using the bias tape on the side. So I'll be using the bias tape from the waist here down to the neck, and from this point down to the waist. I'll do the same thing on this fabric. To do that, I'll place the bias tape on the wrong side of the fabric and pin it down this way. Turn it over to the right side and make a top stitch. And I'll do the same thing on this part. You can see I left about 1 inch on the bias tape so that when I'm through, I am going to trim it out to get the exact shape. So after sewing on one part of the bias tape, I'll trim it out to reduce the tension, and then I'll hem. I did the same thing on the back piece. I've trimmed, so I'll make the top stitch. As you can see, I used both fabrics, so I'll trim it and join back the 1 inch. So this is how it came out. I've also finished both pieces on the front piece. After doing that, I'll place the front pieces together this way and ensure they are aligned. I'll align the waist and pin it down. So I'll be joining the front and the back piece. So I'll place the right sides together this way. And I'll pin it down. So I'll be sewing on 1/2 inch on the side seam and also on the shoulder. I've done that. I've joined the side seam and I have also joined the shoulder. So this is how it came out, and this is how it is on the back piece. The next thing I'm going to do is to hem. So I'll fold in 1/2 inch and fold in 1/2 inch again, and I'll hem it down to the triangle shape this way. I'll do the same thing on this side. I've gone ahead to cut out the sleeve. I have a detailed video on how to draft a basic sleeve. I'll put the link on the description box. I've gone ahead to sew on the side seam and also hem. I'll be using 1/2 inch to join to the top. So I cut out in total 25.5 inches. I used 2 inches to hem, so I have 23 inches here. for the length of the sleeve. As you can see, I cut it out on both fabrics. Now I am going to attach the sleeve to the top. I've done that. I've attached the sleeve and I have also hemmed. If you have not subscribed to my channel, what are you waiting for? We have come to the end of this tutorial, guys. If this was helpful, kindly give this video a thumbs up and also click on the subscribe button, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to be updated when I upload a new video. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.